In this documentary, we will try to tell you about one of the most tragic and unjust wars the history of the world has ever witnessed. We say try because this was a war where everything that could ever happen in a war did happen. A war filled with every kind of drama, tragedy, and death imaginable. We say try because what took place in this war was so horrific that no normal human mind, logic, or heart could ever fully comprehend it. This was a war that changed the course of the First World War, reshaped the political geography of the world, led to the change of regime in Russia, laid the foundations for the establishment of the Republic of Turkey, and brought Mustafa Kemal Atatürk onto the stage of history with his brilliant leadership and command. This was a war fought between young men who defended their homeland to the death against an enemy they could not understand. Soldiers who had come from 15,000 kilometers away, not even knowing where they were going, as if on a holiday trip. It was the last war of the Ottoman Empire, the war that would lay the foundation for the Turkish Republic to be born just 8 years later. This was the Battle of Gallipoli. At 10:30 a.m., the enemy fleet began to enter the strait. At 11:30, the bombardment began. The gates of hell had opened. Shortly after the bombardment began, the Allied fleet started to suffer heavy losses under the fierce fire of the Turkish artillery, and from the mines that the mine layer Nusret, commanded by Captain Hakib Bey, had laid only 10 days earlier. "20 minutes after the bombardment began, the French battleship Bouvet sank with its 648 crew members. Soon after, the British battleship Irresistible took its eternal place in the depths of the Dardanelles. When the battleship Ocean, already crippled by 26-year-old artilleryman Corporal Said's direct hit, struck a mine and sank as well, the Allies realized the terrible truth. They could not pass through the Dardanelles by sea. We will return to Corporal Said later in this documentary, because the moment the Allies realized they had lost the naval battles of Gallipoli was the very moment when Corporal Said's shell struck the ocean. By 6 p.m., it was all over. In roughly 6 hours, 1/3 of the Allied fleet had either sunk or been rendered useless. In the naval battles alone, the Allies lost around 800 men, while the Turkish side lost about 97. Up to this point, what you have heard is the story of how the world's most powerful fleet, believed to be invincible, was defeated in just a few hours. The Allied forces, who thought they would easily pass through the Dardanelles, withdrew into deep silence and retreated. That 37-day silence was in fact the calm before the real storm, the day of apocalypse that would come on April 25th. Let's use that silence to travel for a moment to Egypt. In Egypt, 75,000 Anzac soldiers, unaware of the hell they were about to enter, were training, believing they would soon be sent to fight in Europe. Among them were British, French, Australian, New Zealander, Russian, Algerian, Senegalese, Indian, and native troops. Most were so young they could barely be called men. For those who wonder where the name Anzac comes from, here's a small note. Tired of repeatedly writing Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, a clerk at headquarters came up with the short name formed from the initials, Anzac. Meanwhile, on March 24th, a German general named Otto Liman von Sanders was appointed commander of the 5th Army in Gallipoli, consisting of 65,000 men. April 25th, the Dardanelles. Time, 4:30 a.m. Doomsday begins. At dawn, a 16-year-old soldier from Eceabat, Adil Şahin, noticed movement on the strait and woke his unit. The first landing began at 4:00 a.m. in Arıburnu Cove. Soon, others followed at Morto Cove, Ertuğrul Cove, Tekke Cove, İkiz Cove, and Pınarhiçi Cove. In just the first 15 minutes, of the 700 soldiers in the landing boats, only 300 remained alive, and nearly all of them were badly wounded. We won't go into every detail of the landings, but the events of that first day at Arıburnu changed the entire course of the Gallipoli campaign and shifted the balance of morale. The German commander Liman von Sanders had assumed the landings would take place at Saros Bay and had concentrated most of his forces there. However, Lieutenant Colonel Mustafa Kemal, appointed to Gallipoli on January 20th, 1915, as commander of the 19th Division at just 34 years of age, knew the strategic importance of Kocaçimen Hill, a high ground dominating the peninsula, and correctly predicted that the landings would come at Arıburnu. Losing that hill would mean losing the war. Mustafa Kemal's decision to take initiative, risking his career by acting without waiting for orders, would prove decisive in winning the battle. The British had always underestimated the Turkish defense, but they would soon realize the kind of nightmare they had walked into. According to their plan, not a single Anzac soldier was even supposed to set foot on shore. After all, why would the most powerful navy in the world, the undefeated Armada, fear the Turks? A few cannon shots, they thought, would silence the Turks in their trenches, and they would sail right through the Dardanelles. But in the first hours of the landing, they faced such fierce resistance that the sea and the shore changed color, covered with the bodies of Anzacs struck down before they could even reach land. But in the first few hours of the landing, they faced such fierce resistance that the sea and the shore changed color, covered with the bodies of Anzacs struck down before they could even reach land. In just the first 15 minutes, of the 700 soldiers in the landing boats, only 300 remained alive, and nearly all of them were badly wounded. We won't go into every detail of the landings, but the events of that first day at Arıburnu changed the entire course of the Gallipoli campaign and shifted the balance of morale. When Lieutenant Colonel Mustafa Kemal learned that the enemy had landed at Arıburnu and was advancing, he took decisive initiative. Knowing the critical importance of Kocaçimen Hill, he immediately ordered his 57th Regiment to march there, without waiting for orders from above. In fact, Mustafa Kemal's 19th Division was officially a reserve division of the 5th Army, meant to move only upon command when needed. After a long march, he allowed his soldiers a short 10-minute rest, but he himself continued forward to assess the situation at Arıburnu. When he reached Conkbayırı, history was made. He encountered about 10 surviving soldiers from a group of 240 tasked with observing the Arıburnu coastline. When he asked where they were going, they said, "Sir, we've run out of ammunition." Mustafa Kemal replied, "If you run out of bullets, you still have your bayonets," and ordered them to lie down on the ground. The Anzac troops advancing towards Conkbayırı, confused by what they saw, stopped and lay down as well. That was the first moment the Anzac advance was halted. Mustafa Kemal later described that moment as the moment we won the war. When the 57th Regiment finally arrived, he gave an order that would go down in world military history. "I am not ordering you to attack. I am ordering you to die." That was the moment Mustafa Kemal stepped onto the stage of history. At 10:30 a.m., the 57th Regiment reached the collapsing Turkish lines, and Mustafa Kemal took full command of the front. Without hesitation, the heroic soldiers of the 57th Regiment charged, and a brutal struggle began. Both sides suffered terribly. Mustafa Kemal's own battalion was almost completely wiped out. On that first day alone, the Anzacs suffered a devastating defeat, losing 2,000 men, and the land they gained measured no more than half a kilometer. After the first 10 days, total casualties on both sides had exceeded 10,000. As the fighting dragged on, the color of the earth changed. The streams turned red with blood. The ground became impassable, covered with corpses and body parts. Let us pause the story of the war here for a moment to talk about a terrible enemy, one neither side had foreseen. By May, a new and common enemy had joined the battlefield. An enemy that could not be destroyed by any known rule of war, whose victims suffered deaths far more painful than being struck by bullets. Flies. As the weather grew hotter and the corpses began to rot and reek, their numbers exploded until clouds of flies darkened the air. In the endless trench battles, both sides' trenches filled with bodies and human remains. The corpses left for weeks under the scorching sun decayed, spreading a horrific stench. The flies swarmed first to the latrine pits, then to the corpses, and finally to the trenches themselves. Eating without sharing it with flies became impossible. And of course, this brought epidemics with it. Soldiers began to fall to diseases like dysentery, jaundice, and typhoid. The rotting bodies, the unbearable stench from latrines, and the diseases spread by the flies made being shot almost seem like mercy. By August, 80% of the Anzac soldiers at Arıburnu were suffering from dysentery. By the end of the campaign, 20,000 Turkish soldiers had died from disease. Dysentery, a disease that rots your insides, forces you to use the toilet 15 to 20 times a day, drains your strength, and wastes your body away. Now, let's imagine what it was like for the soldiers fighting in those trenches on both sides. Now, let's imagine what it was like for the soldiers fighting in those trenches on both sides. Now let's imagine what it was like for the soldiers fighting in those trenches on both sides. Bullets and shells raining down on you non-stop. In front of your eyes, the rotting bodies of the friends you shared bread with just a day ago. The trench around you, full of human remains and stench. And on top of that, fighting disease. You are weak, constantly needing the toilet. Sometimes you go where you are. Sometimes, if you can even move, you crawl to the nearest latrine pit. There is no water. You've been in the same trench for weeks. You're covered in lice. The diseases spread by flies are everywhere. Some of your comrades fall into the latrine pits and drown, too weak to climb out. What happened here defied every rule of war. It was more than any human could bear. The continuous fighting made it almost impossible to evacuate the sick. The stench was so unbearable that you sometimes had to pour gasoline on corpses and burn them. Now, let's leave the flies for a moment and return to the battlefield itself. On the morning of May 19th, 40,000 Turkish soldiers launched a massive assault on the Anzac lines. But the Anzac forces were prepared. The attack raged until noon the following day. When it ended, the Anzacs had lost 600 men. The Turks, 10,000 martyrs. From the neck to Bloody Ridge and all the way to the sea, the ground was covered with corpses. It became impossible to move between the trenches without stepping on bodies. The swollen and decaying dead spread a suffocating stench, and disease made fighting unbearable. On May 24th, 2.5 months after the war began, an 8-hour truce was declared to bury the dead. It was like halftime in a football match. Everywhere, corpses, limbs, the remains of men. For the first time, soldiers from both sides met face to face. They saw each other's eyes, saw the horror reflected there, and realized that the one they were fighting was also human. After that truce, something remarkable happened on both sides. A strange, instinctive respect began to grow between the enemies. After 8 hours, everyone returned to their trenches, and the war resumed exactly where it had left off. After May 29th, the battle moved underground. At Bombasırtı, both sides began digging tunnels toward each other, fighting hand-to-hand with bayonets beneath the earth. From June 4th to July 12th, the fiercest fighting of the entire campaign took place at Seddülbahir. The fiercest fighting of the entire campaign took place at Seddülbahir. Both sides threw everything they had into destroying one another. Everywhere was filled with bodies. Seddülbahir had become unlivable. Nothing remained but dust, filth, corpses, and bullets. When the fighting ended, the Allies had lost 20,000 men and advanced only 1 kilometer. The Turks had lost around 50,000 martyrs. Those losses accounted for the majority of Turkish soldiers killed at Gallipoli. On August 6th, the Australians launched a massive attack with 100,000 men to capture Conkbayırı. The fiercest of these assaults took place at Bloody Ridge, a fight fought hand-to-hand, bayonet to bayonet. The Australians would never forget Bloody Ridge. They would compare every battle they fought afterward to it. They would compare every battle they fought afterward to it. They would compare every battle they fought afterward to it. On the night of August 8th, Liman von Sanders handed over the command of the Arıburnu and Anafartalar fronts to Mustafa Kemal. Mustafa Kemal first advanced towards Anafartalar with 4 battalions. By nightfall, Anafartalar was once again in Turkish hands. By nightfall, Anafartalar was once again in Turkish hands. The next target was Conkbayırı. At Conkbayırı, the New Zealanders lost nearly half of their 4,500 soldiers. On August 9th, 3 Turkish regiments struggling to repel the attacks were on the brink of annihilation. With the last remaining troops under his command, Mustafa Kemal organized a sudden counterattack, leaving over 2,000 British soldiers dead on the field. Conkbayırı was recaptured. Conkbayırı was recaptured. The fighting at Anafartalar continued until the end of August. In the intense fire, many wounded soldiers trapped in burning heathland were consumed by the flames. The scene was horrific. Despite the heavy losses, every British assault was repelled. Everyone was exhausted. Death had become ordinary. Both sides had long since lost their emotions. While this terrible slaughter raged at the front, what were the politicians doing? In their warm rooms, sipping their coffee, they debated who was to blame for the disaster, and when, and how they should withdraw from Gallipoli. Yet every hour lost in those discussions meant more horrific deaths on the front, more suffering in that living hell. By November 26th, a great storm swept across Gallipoli. Floodwaters poured down from the hills into the trenches. Corpses floated on the water. Many soldiers drowned. Despite the flood, the bombardment continued relentlessly. The next day, a terrible snowstorm began. Now, death had taken on a new form. Gallipoli had entered the coldest winter in years. Imagine it. Fighting all day in rain, snow, and freezing cold. And at night, soaked to the bone, in trenches filled with water, snow, and corpses, waiting motionless for dawn in a killing frost. Everything was wet. Everything was covered in death. The helplessness was unbearable on both sides. 16,000 soldiers were evacuated because of frostbite. Nearly 300 froze to death. And while all this was happening, the politicians, still sipping their coffee, continued to debate what to do. Finally, after 6 weeks of argument, the British realized they could not pass through Çanakkale and decided to withdraw from Gallipoli. The war ended on January 9th, 1916. They left, abandoning behind them thousands of dead. Those who survived this disastrous campaign carried the pain for the rest of their lives. They never forgot the hell they had lived through. Let us take a brief look at this peninsula as it stands today. The apocalypse took place on a small piece of land, a peninsula of just 895 square kilometers. Here are the cliffs of Arıburnu, which they once tried desperately to climb. This is Kocaçimen Hill, where the bloody battles of the first day were fought. Look down below, the plains of Anafartalar. On the shore, a forgotten lifeboat. Perhaps those who came ashore in that boat now lie somewhere up there. These trenches, scattered all over the peninsula, stand as the silent witnesses of the apocalypse that took place 110 years ago. Everywhere you go, monuments tell the stories of what happened here. Let's pause here for a moment. Corporal Sayit, the man who survived this hell. Corporal Sayit, who ended the naval battles by firing the shell that struck the battleship Ocean. Corporal Sayit, who served 9 years in the Ottoman army. Corporal Sayit, a veteran of Gallipoli. Corporal Sayit, who, after all he lived through, perhaps even felt sorrow that he had not become a martyr on the front. His full name, Sayit Ali Çabuk. Do you know how this hero, the man who ended the naval battles of Çanakkale and changed the course of the war, died? In his hometown of Havran, after being prevented from working as a woodcutter, he took a job carrying sacks in a mill. There, he caught pneumonia and died. He was only 50 years old. We just wanted to remind you. And everywhere, cemeteries of martyrs. In truth, these cemeteries hold only those heroes whose graves could be found. Thousands of others remain scattered across the land. They live on in the trees, the ants, in the DNA of every living thing on this peninsula. Even today, when it rains, fragments of bone and bullets sometimes rise from the earth, as if to remind us why such days must never come again. When you walk upon this soil, there's a high chance that a martyr lies beneath your feet. An 18-year-old Turkish soldier, and, not far away, an 18-year-old Anzac soldier. Now, they will lie here side by side forever, and never grow old. Who knows how they died? Another day ends on the historic peninsula. Now is the time for silence. May they rest in peace. On this tiny peninsula of 895 square kilometers, within an area of only 500 square kilometers, thousands of soldiers tried mercilessly to destroy one another. They were shot, torn apart, burned, drowned, fell into latrine pits, succumbed to epidemics. In short, they tasted every form of death. It was the terrible war between those who regretted coming here and those who fought to defend their homeland to the death. When the war was over, thousands of martyrs had merged with the soil. The British, who could not pass Gallipoli through war, crossed it just 3 years later, without firing a single shot, and occupied Istanbul.